So in this clip, we are going to see the CNN Newsnight panel descend into absolute chaos, debating the ongoing feud between Donald Trump and the Pope. Yes, you heard that correct. Between Donald Trump and the Pope. As usual, let's watch the clip in full. I'm going to hold my commentary, my perspective, my thoughts towards the end, and then we'll get into it. Let's go.
Scott Jennings, Val Demings, Caroline Downey, David Hogg, Margaret Donovan, and Anna Navarro. Americans with different perspectives aren't talking to each other, but here they do. Good evening, I'm Abby Phillip in New York. Suddenly, Republicans don't want religion in politics. President Trump's war of words with the Pope is again escalating, but this time it's his allies that are doing the talking. For days, President Trump has criticized the Pope for speaking out against the Iran war, which has received bipartisan backlash. And then, of course, he added fuel to the fire when he posted a picture depicting himself as Jesus. He posted another picture today, but this time he is alongside AI Jesus. The Pope continues to advocate for peace, even doing so again tonight, while Republican officials are lecturing him on all things theology and doctrine.
Now, we can, of course, have disagreements about whether this or that conflict is just, but I think that it's important, in the same way that it's important for the Vice President of the United States to be careful when I talk about matters of public policy. I think it's very, very important for the Pope to be careful when he talks about matters of theology. Well, you've got to make sure it's anchored in the truth.
The Pope needs to keep his business into leading his flock, so to speak, leading the church, and probably stay out of the political arena. He doesn't need to be getting involved in the political arena. Go lead your church. I didn't elect the Pope to be president.
A pontiff or any religious leader can say anything they want, but obviously if you wade into political waters, I think you should expect some political response, and I think the Pope's received some of that.
It's not clear when a life and death war became just politics, but here we are in this moment for the church and state and war. I mean, since when do popes, are popes told they can't talk about war, they can't talk about peace, they can't talk about people who are dying and people who are living all around the world?
Since the beginning of the year of our Lord, popes have talked about peace, whether they were in war times, we were in war times, or peace times. Popes talk about peace. This Christmas, I will get dozens, if not more, of cards that say, peace on earth, goodwill towards men. I'm not really sure what is going on in this country, but we have a lot going on. And to say the Pope needs to be careful when he's discussing theology just makes no sense to me. It just really doesn't. The Pope is doing what popes do. And you know, the president wants a Nobel Peace Prize. He talks about wars that he's stopped around the world. Isn't that about peace? So I'm not sure what we're doing.
Remember, he doesn't need the Nobel Peace Prize. He already got that prize from FIFA.
As a practicing Catholic, I know that the Vatican doesn't operate in our political paradigm. It's in the divine spiritual realm. So when the Pope sounds like the UN spokesperson saying no confrontation, no conflict, only peacekeeping, only diplomacy, that is totally normal. However, we learned this lesson with Pope Francis, who waded into politics probably more than any other pope before him, at least in terms of our modern politics. You do have to care about precision and exactitude as the successor to Peter, as someone who is informing the opinions of so many lay Catholics. So when you say, as the Pope, and I say this as a practicing Catholic, that God does not hear the prayers of those who wage war, that is a bit precarious and does risk confusing practicing Catholics, because does that mean the war to fight Hitler in World War II, was that unjustified?
Well,
the war against the Soviet Union, was that unjustified? I'm just saying that to say that he should be a little bit more precise, that's not like this.
Okay, but it's rather rich. It's rather rich for...
Before you jump in, Anna, there is actual clarity from the Catholic Church on this, to your point. And the Bishop James Massa, the Doctrine Committee Chair, so this is straight from the Catholic Church, says, a constant tenet of that 1,000-year tradition is a nation can only legitimately take up the sword in self-defense once all peace efforts have failed. That is, to be a just war, it must be a war of defense against another who actively wages war, which is what the Holy
Yes.
Father actually said. Quote, he does not listen to the prayers of those who wage war. So it continues, when Pope Leo speaks as supreme pastor of the Universal Church, he is not merely offering opinions on theology. He is preaching the gospel and exercising his ministry as the vicar of Christ. So he's basically saying, in fewer words, the Pope is teaching the gospel. He is speaking literally what the just war theory is. And I guess my question to you is, do you think that J.D. Vance knows more about Catholic theology than the Pope?
Well, like, I hear what you're saying about just war theory. That was created by St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Augustine. And what you're saying is that it has to be proportionate to the
I'm
actual
not saying
threat.
it, just to be clear.
No, that is what just war theory is. But it's also up to lay Catholics, according to the Vatican II Council, Second Vatican Council, to decide what that means for temporal matters. Just because the Pope makes some sort of dictate on political issues, that's not a religious proclamation.
I too am a Catholic, not a very flawed one. Granted, when I go to church, it should burst into flames. But here's what I know. In my lifetime, I've known no Pope that has more political involvement than John Paul II. He was part of a triumvirate with Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan in beating communism. He did things like show up in Cuba. He did things like show up in Nicaragua and confront the Sandinistas to their face. So popes have always been political. It comes with a job. I do think that the job of U.S. president and the job of pope are two completely different things, and each of them is speaking to their constituent. I think it's ridiculous that we're having like a rational conversation and debate here about theology, because the insane, decrepit, senile old man who's in the White House is posting pictures of himself, posing like Jesus, and attacking the Pope. This is, and I think it's rather rich and ridiculous and ironic for J.D. Vance, who is the vice president, to the president who is the least careful with words in my lifetime in this country, the man who celebrates death of Rob Reiner and Bob Mueller, the man who cusses on Easter Sunday. For now, J.D. Vance wants people to be careful with their words, or maybe he should tell the guy he works for.
Does she have a point about that? Why, first of all, why criticize the Pope and say, you better be careful with your discussion of theology and your use of words, when he doesn't care whether or not his own boss is careful with his words?
Yeah, I heard the vice president there. I actually think he had it backwards. I think that the Pope should be talking about theology. I respect the Pope's role in running the Catholic Church, and I also respect Donald Trump and J.D. Vance's role in American politics. That's their realm in which to be speaking their mind. And so I thought he had it backwards. It's interesting that you referenced Pope John Paul II and President Reagan. I was thinking about this this evening. There's a tremendous opportunity here for this Pope. If he would look at it this way: we're in the middle of a ceasefire, this blockade is working, there are no bombs falling, there's diplomacy going on right now. And there is a real chance, because of what Trump has done and the situation we find ourselves in, for the world to bring pressure, economic pressure, and diplomatic pressure, just like what was done in the 80s, to bear against this terrorist regime, just the way it was brought to bear against the Soviets in the 1980s. And so I get the feeling sometimes the Pope might be feeling a little adversarial, at least in some of his comments toward President Trump. I don't know that personally. It's my sense of it. But in this moment where you have, there's no bombs falling right now. There's a blockade, there's some restraint going on, and there's talks going on. This to me is a moment where you could have a partnership for peace in a way that brings this terrorist regime that, by the way, has been at war with the West for nearly 50 years to its knees. And I think just the way we brought the Soviets to their knees, it could happen right here.
Don't you think that opportunity goes both ways? In other words, it's also an opportunity for the President of the United States to cultivate an alliance with the leader of the Catholic Church and other foreign leaders, frankly, because what he's done by taking on the Pope is not just antagonize Catholics, he's antagonized people like his ally Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy, where the Vatican is.
It's a fair question. It's a fair question.
The Reagan, John Paul II, Margaret Thatcher thing was years of cultivation of relationships.
But it's
not
this is a
4 in the morning tweets.
But this is a moment.
It's irrational what he's doing, and you know it.
Well, it's not irrational to stand up to the Iranians.
It's irrational to be posting.
It's not irrational, but
we're in a moment. Pictures of himself.
We're in a moment.
Is it rational to threaten a genocide of 90 million people? Is that rational, Scott? To threaten a genocide of 90 million people on Easter Sunday?
That didn't happen.
What do you think
Well,
meant
Scott,
by that?
you know what he's referring to.
I do.
Right?
An entire civilization.
And let me live.
Trump said, well, let me live in reality
today.
Let me just reiterate to the audience. The president said in a message that an entire civilization may die tonight.
On Easter Sunday.
He said that. So a lot of people read that as him threatening to wipe out an entire civilization. So the Pope, it does seem like the Pope would actually be rational to respond to that, and to say, hey, we shouldn't be in the business of war. And I think you're right that I'm sure the Pope is happy that there is a ceasefire, but he was responding to Trump waging a war. Does he not have a right to respond to that part of it too?
He has a right to say whatever he wants, but I would just say we're waging war against people who've been waging war against us for nearly 50 years. And look, the reality is, and the moment that we're in is special because we've got this regime on its knees economically, which has China. That's a problem for them as well. We've got a moment here where we can change something and change a situation that's been bad for tens of millions of people for going on 5 decades now. And I just, my hope, look, by the way, a lot of politicians in America disagree with the Pope. Do you guys agree with the Pope about abortion and gay marriage?
Well, let me say this.
The answer is no. You don't. And that's okay.
But hold on a
and that's
second.
okay. It happens all the time.
Hold on a second.
But we all
Hold on
should
a second,
agree with the
Scott.
Pope on
A lot of
peace.
people,
On peace.
not everybody's a Catholic. A lot of people disagree with
Donald
the Pope.
Trump's not a Catholic.
Hold on a second. A lot of people
was.
disagree with the
Biden
Pope on a
was.
lot of doctrine.
And he was not in line.
But hang on just a second. Before we go down that road, because we also know that Donald Trump supported abortion before he opposed it. But also,
he's been the most pro-life president we've ever had.
The response when you disagree with the Pope is very different from what Donald Trump did. What Trump said was the Pope is weak on crime. The Pope,
that part,
he's insulting the man rather than just saying we have a disagreement.
I agree with you.
Let's not whitewash what actually happened.
You don't measure the Pope by those political metrics.
That's one of the most interesting things.
Hold on, Carolyn. I'm not understanding. I mean, I'm just saying Trump's response to his disagreement is not what anybody else's response is. Rather than just saying we disagree, the Pope is he's a figure of the church. I respect his opinion. We agree to disagree. He insulted the Pope. He attacked him repeatedly on social media. That is not what anybody else, frankly.
I agree with you that there was antagonism. But what I'm trying to also say is that they both fueled the fire. And if you look at what...
Excuse me?
To say that any war is unjustified, Abby, do you really believe that?
I don't agree. Most Americans wouldn't agree with that.
Caroline, let me just play.
Let
me play.
What prompted this war?
Just a second. Let me just play this because I think you're arguing
of Iranians in the streets.
Hang on a second. You're Catholic. You're arguing with me as if I am the arbiter of Catholic doctrine. I am not.
I know,
but these are the clergy. Let me just play. This is from 60 Minutes on Sunday, sitting with 3 influential Catholic bishops this weekend.
Iran has been the chief exporter of terror. Is there no scenario in which preventing that can be a just war?
It's an abominable regime, and it should be removed. But this is a war of choice that we went to, and I think it's embedded in a wider moment in the United States that's worrying, which is this. We're seeing before us the possibility of war after war after war.
Catholic leaders are very
disagree with this, by the way.
There's multiple orders of the Catholic Church.
All I'm saying is that it is totally normal and fine in any society to disagree with the doctrines of a church. It doesn't matter if you're Catholic or not. But how Trump has disagreed, how Trump has made it personal, made it specific to this Pope is very different
the president
from what normal
said
people do.
That the Pope,
let me give him the last word because he hasn't said much in this segment.
No, I think that what we're seeing is a breakdown. The war that people feel like is being waged on them here in America more than anything is the fact that young people in particular were told by their president that he was not going to drag us into more forever wars, and he was going to lower prices, and he was going to release the Epstein files. We've seen him go back on every single one of those promises. Caroline, you and I disagree on a lot of stuff, but the fact of the matter is, you probably were born around the same time as 9/11 as I was. Our entire lives, most of our lives, our country has been at wars in the Middle East that have gotten us nowhere but more in debt. And if young Americans continue to feel left behind more and more because we were dragged into a war that we didn't need to have to be in the first place, and anybody with an elementary school understanding of foreign policy could have told you the Strait of Hormuz was going to get shut down, and that is exactly
And who controls
what
it right now? Who controls the
why are
right now?
gas prices so high then?
Why were they high during Biden's administration? Did you like that?
It wasn't because of a because of a geopolitical
Here's the deal.
fumble.
Who controls the Strait? You're using last week's talking points, David. We control the Strait. We are in charge of this conflict right now.
Joe Biden and Donald Trump is he helped them end forever wars, and it wasn't popular, but he did it.
It went
Guess
great.
what?
It
We
went
just
great.
got into another one,
It went
and
great.
it's going a hell of a lot worse.
What do you mean? We're in control of the Strait, are we not? Iran is on its knees right
So
now. They're losing hundreds of millions of dollars a day, and they will not have
democratize tomorrow. This country that is going
no,
that is being
that is literally
It just needs to be something we can
Scott,
deal with.
they don't need a nuclear weapon.
Name me one time that a country has been successfully through an aerial campaign bombed into a democratic transition.
I'm not interested in the
Because
transition.
it hasn't happened.
I'm interested
Because you
in
don't
whether they have a
focus on
nuclear
the facts,
war
on the history.
or nuclear weapon.
Abby, this is a country that's entire history has been defined by foreign outside people and other groups, especially from the West, coming in and enforcing regime change. As terrible as the regime is,
they've been the same
this
regime
is
for
not
50 years.
And you know why we got to this place? It's because of a CIA-backed coup in the first place.
Because of Biden capitulation to the regime.
So hold on.
That's why it happened.
We're gonna actually talk a little bit more about what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz later in the show. So let's hold on that.
So it's quite interesting, because first and foremost, I want to start with what Scott Jennings just said. That's actually not true. The United States do not control the Strait of Hormuz. That is factually incorrect. Just straight up, I'm not here to try and, tell you guys any lies. You guys know I don't do that. I like to do my research, and I like to do my research well. Yes, the US has imposed a blockade on Iran's ports and its coastline, but not a blockade on the Strait of Hormuz itself. Furthermore, literally ships have been going through and passing through the Strait of Hormuz while paying a toll to Iran. So Scott Jennings just saying that, once again, as I always say, that's typical MAGA. That's how they are. They will lie to their audience, plain and simply because they believe their audience won't to go and do their own research. But all it is that I want to say is this. Do you know how much of a cult you need to be to get to a point where you believe that much in Donald Trump that you're willing to side with him over your faith's spiritual leader? Like, these guys are really, really siding with Donald Trump over the Pope. Like, what are we doing here? What are we actually doing here? It makes absolutely no sense. And if you actually deep and understand what the Pope said, it made complete sense. Then you've got the couch lover, JD Vance, literally trying to go toe-to-toe, head-to-head with the Pope on biblical theology. This is the depths of the cult of MAGA, the cult of Trump and Trumpism. This guy could get every single person in MAGA to turn on their own mother or child if they needed to, because this is how much they do not think for themselves. Let me know your thoughts on this exchange in the comment section below. While you guys are down there, do me a favor, hit the thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button, and be sure to turn on the bell notification so that you get notified every time we upload a brand new video. Appreciate you guys. See you guys in the next one.